Good morning, Bodhi tree meditators. Welcome back to our sixth class in this present course series on mindfulness meditation. Good to see you all here this morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome along to Bodhi tree Buddhism mindfulness meditation course for our sixth and last class of this series. If you are tuning in with us here this morning, please leave a comment in the comment section, just so I can see who's online and who's joining us today. Whether you are, or also if you're not watching live, if you're watching this after the fact, please feel free also to drop in a comment in the comment section. It's always nice to know who we've got joining us online here. Okay, now as I just said, today is the sixth class in this present course on mindfulness meditation. And so we're going to be looking at the last section of our text, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta. So the great teaching on the foundations of mindfulness. And we'll also be looking, and when I say the last part of the text, it's going to be talking about the fourth of the four grounds of mindfulness, so mindfulness of Dhammas. And also we're going to be looking at the very last section of the text. There's a little kind of, you could say like conclusion, but it's the part where the Buddha is talking about some of the results that can be had from these practices. Okay, I see we've got Terry tuning in with us here this morning. Good morning to you there, Terry, and everyone else there who's tuning in from the Philippines, maybe with the Kalyana meditation group. Good to see you all as always. And also Meifang, nice to see you as well. Hope you're doing well. And yeah, it's very fitting that the two of you are the first two commenting and tuning in, because you've been two of my biggest supporters here. And so, I really appreciate the two of you not just tuning in and joining us for class, but also for sharing whenever I'm putting out notifications for classes. So thank you very much appreciated. And anyone else, if you're tuning in, I can see, the little live stream box that pops up there in Facebook. It gives me a number of how many eyes are watching. So I know there's a few of you out there that are lurking. If you're a lurker, maybe a short-term lurker or a long-term lurker, just feel free to drop in a comment. And so, like I said, it's good to see who's with us today. Okay, so today's the last class, and so we're going to be looking at mindfulness of Dhammas. Today, just in a second when I flip over and we can look at the text, I've decided for today not to use PDF. I've pulled that text out and put it into a Word file. Because some of those problems we were having with PDF earlier. I hope this fixes the problem. I probably should have done it a few weeks ago. So we'll have a look at the text there. Okay, I see Nathaniel, long-term lurker. You're not a lurker, Nathaniel. You're always tuning in. You are visible. You're not lurking. You are visible and actively participating. Okay, but good to see you too, Nathaniel. Hope you're doing well wherever you are. And of course, that applies not just to Nathaniel, but to everyone. I've always, all this class is taking place during this COVID-19, which is being so devastating worldwide. And I've always kind of felt during class time, I'm a bit in two minds. Part of me kind of wants to talk about it because, it's on my mind. I'm sure it's on other people's minds, and it's also part of our lives. But at the same time, kind of the other part of me is thinking maybe we should have the classes like a time where we're not focused on that, and we can kind of focus on our practice and focus on the Dharma. But I think I can't not mention it at all. So I'm not sure what the situation where everyone tuning in is like. It seems to me that in a lot of places this so-called second wave is kicking in. I think right from the start, a lot of the specialists and the medical specialists were sort of warning everyone about this. Usually saying that like the so-called Spanish flu back in like 100 years ago went through a sort of a similar process. And yeah, they were right. And so it seems in a lot of places the second wave is kicking in. See it in the US. It's also happening in Australia, particularly down in Victoria and Melbourne. And so for those of you that are tuning into the classes, maybe where you're living, there's like a new kind of restrictions and new kind of advice: wear masks, wash hands, stay home, social distancing, and all these things. And I think after months ago, when these things were starting to begin, it was probably like quite a bit of a shock for most of us, sort of like, oh, okay, this coronavirus, and we need to act in these certain ways, and we can be very, very dedicated and trying to learn and educate ourselves and change our behavior. And it's quite difficult at first, but yeah, we managed to do it. And then after a while, perhaps, of doing that, we can maybe get a bit like sloppy, because we're not so like consciously pushing it all the time. But with this kind of second wave that's kicking in, it just really reminds us that like, no, we can't be sloppy. We've got to be really sharp on this, because it just takes a small kind of error, be it unintentional or error in judgment or something like that, and that could be the action, that misstep that puts us in danger and puts our friends and family and loved ones, and of course strangers, puts them at risk as well. So just kind of a reminder. Now, probably though, when you're sitting here for class, probably tuning in, I'm guessing most of you are tuning in your own homes, and while even at home we have to be a bit more careful, things that are coming in from outside, we bring them in, washing our hands. I just had like a delivery parcel coming in today, so that's coming from outside, so we've got to make sure that we handle it correctly, wash our hands afterwards, and so forth. But hopefully at home at least you can be a bit more relaxed. I mean, Mayfang's just put the comment on there, masks on for all. Yeah, sure, when we're outside. I'm guessing you're not wearing a mask at home. So hopefully we can be a little bit more relaxed. I mean, it's like you're seeing me here now. I'm not wearing one, but when we're outside in public transport and so on, of course, we have to take that. Okay, so let's just set that aside for now and get into our content for today. So as I was saying, we today are getting into the last of those 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is mindfulness of Dhammas. And so I'd like to talk a bit about that. So let's, I'm going to flip on over now, change the screen to look at the text. And I'd first just like to quickly skim through it and kind of just look at the structure of it, and then talk a bit about this term Dhammas before we then get into the details. Okay, so this is just like a word file where I've copied and pasted from a PDF, and we can see in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, he heads this up by calling it contemplation of mind objects. So this term mind objects is his translation of the term Dhammas. And what does that entail? It's got a couple of subcategories of the so-called Dhammas. So let's just look at those first. The first one is the 5 hindrances. So these are when we're meditating and we are going from just kind of the regular state of mind, which is this very fragmented, scattered, constantly stimulated and distracted by external sense objects, and of course then reacting to those. And we're trying to move into a meditative state of mind, which is this, clear focus on a given object, and this uninterrupted focus. And of course, by casting aside this attachment to sense objects, so chasing after the things of the senses, we get this joyous, blissful feeling that permeates kind of the body and the mind. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the feelings and the state of meditation, but here the 5 hindrances are the very things that we need to overcome in order to enter into this meditative absorption in the first place. Okay, so in this case, yeah, they are all states of mind, and they are kind of like, because they're like negative states of mind, I mean, hindrances, right? Avarana, so panchavarana is the term in Pali Sanskrit. Chinese will gai in Chinese is like a cover. It's like a covering, something that covers over or blocks the mind. So hindrance, cover, obstacle, we could call it. So these are definitely like mental states, but they're negative mental states. Okay. Let's have a look at the next set. And then, of course, after that, it goes on to the section on insight. So we've already seen that section, that kind of idea throughout the text. So no need, we can just skip through that now. The next set of dhammas here are the 5 aggregates. So the 5 aggregates are our classic Buddhist analysis of the person. You know, it wouldn't just apply to humans. It would pretty much apply to most living beings. So the idea being Buddhism teaching this idea of non-self. So we have the strong sense of identity, what we might call identity view, or self-conceit, where we think that there's this really truly existing me, self. And so the idea of the 5 aggregates is to look at what we think constitutes ourself and break it down. So analyze it and break it down into its constituent categories. So each of these kind of constituent categories is called an aggregate. Yeah, I know there's a lot of discussion among scholars about the term aggregate. It's one of those terms in English language Buddhism where the term aggregate was used for this khandha or skandha in Pali and Sanskrit, and it kind of stuck, and it's kind of just become the standard English term. But you might want to think of like 5 constituent parts, and each of those parts isn't like a thing in itself, it's like a whole category. So basically they include like the physical body, our feelings or sensations, which remember we've covered earlier in the second ground of mindfulness, our perceptions and thoughts, our kind of emotions and volitional tendencies, which includes like, you know, craving and aversion, but also compassion and so on and so forth. And then finally is just this kind of cognition itself, so just the act of seeing or hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. And so the Buddha says, you know, these 5 basic categories are what constitutes our life experience, and each and every one of these is impermanent and changing, it's dissatisfactory, and therefore we can't consider it a self. Okay. Now, the point I want to emphasize here is, so examining ourselves through this lens, through this system or this category of the 5 aggregates is really standard Buddhist practice. But a point here is to say that, like, remember, this all comes under this category of contemplation of mind or contemplation of dhammas, but like the 5 aggregates are not all mind objects. But the first aggregate is the physical body. The physical body, rupa, the physical body, right? Literally, this physical thing here is not a mental object. So that's a bit strange. Okay, so in this category, dhammas doesn't. We can say, does dhammas here really mean mental objects? I'm going to say no. Okay, we'll get back to how to interpret this in the first place. But let's just go through these categories. The third section on mindfulness of dhammas is the 6 bases. So what are the 6 bases? They're basically, so you see here it then talks about the 6 internal and external bases. So we've seen this idea of internal and external before, remember? We've talked about that right back from the very first ground of mindfulness. But these bases are our senses. So we have 6 senses, being our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and of course the mind. These are our 6 senses. They're also known as 6 faculties, like sensory faculties. And these are the 6 internal senses. And then the 6 external ones are then the sensory objects. So the things that we see, so visual objects, the sounds that we hear, the smells, fragrances that we smell, taste or flavors that we taste, tactile objects. And tactile objects, not just like solid things that we might touch, but also includes things like temperature, like sense of balance through the body. And finally, the last one, of course, is objects of the mind. Now, objects of the mind are dhammas. So that, in that case, the objects of the mind is the sixth of the six external bases, definitely refers to mind objects. But again, as a whole, these bases aren't all mental objects. In fact, the first six of them, or first five of them, are all physical sense organs. They're not mental objects. Okay, so by this point, I'm going to say quite firmly, I don't think that mindfulness of dhammas, the term dhamma here should be translated as mental objects. Okay. So again, using the system of analyzing our experience of the world, a kind of a subjective life through our senses and the sense objects, is again another really standard Buddhist practice and way to develop wisdom. And it's got the same kind of rationale and motivation and also result as using the system of the five aggregates, which is to say that when we look at all these, we look at all of our experiences through the subjective side of the senses and the objective side through the objects. None of these constitute an eternal unchanging self, because they're all changing, they're all impermanent, and therefore ultimately dissatisfactory. Okay, but we've got a few more categories. That's the third category. The fourth category is the 7 enlightenment factors. Bodhipakya Dhamma, or Bodhipakshya Dharmani. In Chinese, Qi Jue Zhi. So Bodhi, is awakening. Pakshya literally means like wings on a bird, but they mean like aids or supports to something. The idea being that just as a bird relies upon its wings in order to be able to fly, therefore a pakshya is therefore something that we rely on in order to achieve a result. So a bodhi pakshya is like a wing, an aid or a support. Here it's translated as a factor, sure, in order to reach bodhi, awakening. And there are 7 of them. Now in this case, this system of 7 awakening factors isn't like the 5 aggregates or the 6 senses. It's not a way in order to analyze our lived experience. Not at all. In fact, here the term dharma means something different again. Here the term dharmas in the sense of like practices, things that are to be practiced. When we look through them, and just like I said, just very quickly at this point, just to skim through them. The first one is mindfulness as an enlightenment factor. So this means that then by developing mindfulness, by developing this mindful awareness of the different experiences and the different states that we are undergoing, is one of the factors, it's one of the things that helps us on this path towards awakening, towards wisdom and liberation. Okay, but it's just the first one. Okay, the second one, where's the second one? Investigation of states, and again this term states here refers again to this term dhammas. Okay, so this means like examining different phenomena, we could say, examining them. So whatever's going on internally, the different things that are coming up in your mind when you are meditating, for example, examining them, understanding them. This is also another one of these factors, these aids that leads towards wisdom and knowledge. Third one's energy, so putting in the effort, practicing, continuing to practice, developing our practice, always striving. Rapture. Now the term rapture here is really similar to, do you remember when we were talking, was it last week? I think it was last week, or the week before. The week before. Mindfulness of sensations or feelings. And I was saying that when we enter into meditation and the mind becomes very concentrated, because the mind is kind of detached from this usual just constant stimulation and distraction by sense objects, we have this like inner joy and happiness that comes up within us. This is, here we go, the fourth of these awakening factors. Tranquility, so this comes about by this like calmness, and it's kind of this calm flexibility and suppleness of the mind, which is also, you know, very, very beneficial, as opposed to like a really distracted kind of unwieldy mind. Concentration, of course, being able to concentrate, and then equanimity. So in the face of, say, pleasant experiences, painful experiences, we can be equanimous, rather than like pleasant, ooh, attachment, painful, ooh, you know, aversion, desire, hatred. We're just like, okay, that's a pleasant experience, but I'm chill. That's a painful experience. I'm unrattled, right? Again, that's like this really important factor on this path towards liberation. Okay, so that's a really brief description of the 7 awakening factors, but you can see here that the term, they're not just kind of, it's not a system of analysis of the body and mind. These are things that we need to develop on the path. And the next section as well, last one here, the 4 Noble Truths, is also this thing we need to develop. It's not so much that we like develop the noble truth. We don't have to develop suffering. It's not suffering that we develop. It's actually an understanding of suffering. And so to have this clear, precise, unerring knowledge that there is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, which is our afflictions, in particular ignorance, craving, aversion. Because there is a cause of suffering, therefore it's possible to reach a state where we have ended suffering. Right? It's possible to end suffering and dissatisfaction, and that is nirvana. Technically it's nirodha, which means cessation, but it's basically synonymous with nirvana, this pacification of the afflictions and this state which is freed from afflictions and the pain and suffering and distress that comes from those. And because of this, therefore, there must be some way, there must be some method that we can cultivate or develop, which leads to the removal of the origin and ultimately arrives at the goal of a state freed from afflictions. So again, here we see the 4 Noble Truths as this last part of mindfulness of dhammas. So dhammas here doesn't just mean like mental objects or like phenomena that constitute our embodied experience of the world. It means kind of truths and things that we need to understand and develop within ourselves. Okay, now then the text continues on. We get into the conclusion here. Okay, so let's just skip back a little bit here. Okay, I'm going to flip screens on you and pop back here. Now, what was I saying? So just when we're trying to understand, okay, what is meant by this 4th foundation of mindfulness and mindfulness of dhammas, the term dhammas here, that's why I personally haven't been translating it. You've got at least 3 kind of meanings. You've got one meaning, which is in the sense of like the phenomena that make up the world. So when we're analyzing the world through the 5 aggregate system, or when we're analyzing the world through the 6 bases system, then we're kind of using this idea of dhammas as like the phenomena that make up the world. Could be mental, could be physical, that doesn't matter. They are things. They're the constituent parts of the world. Okay, so that's one of our first meanings of dhammas. Of course, that does include mental phenomena. Okay, remember for Buddhism, I think there's a lot of other, I think in general, a lot of contemporary people tend to think of like real things are like the physical world, and then thoughts are not real things. Like a dog is a dog, but a thought of a dog, a dog is a dog, which is a real dog, but a thought of a dog isn't really a dog. Therefore, the thought of a dog is not real. But in Buddhist thought, we say, well, yeah, the dog is a dog. It's really a dog. really a dog, because we don't want to say that there's this essential, true, unchanging, eternal dog. Not what we're implying, just the dog. But then the thought of a dog, sure, the thought of a dog isn't a dog, but that thought is really a thought. And therefore, in Buddhist terms, the reality of this fluffy little puppy and the reality of a thought of a fluffy little puppy, remember it's the thought, are equally real. This is a material phenomena and this is a mental phenomena. And so when we're talking about dhammas as the phenomena that make up the world, physical things and internal mental things, thoughts, perceptions, emotions, feelings, consciousness itself, these are all equally real. No, I don't want to say like absolutely, truly, really, real, but they have kind of an equal level of reality, shall we say. I think the next course is going to have to be on Madhyamaka if I continue up this line of thought. Okay. What was I saying? So that's the first meaning of dhammas here. Now the second meaning of dhamma is, like if we look at, say, the 7 factors of awakening, then these are practices that we need to develop. And in that sense, not just the 7 factors of awakening, but even like these 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? These 4 foundations of mindfulness. These are practices that we should engage in. And so you've got the sense of like, practices that we should engage in, but there's also a kind of sense, the practices that we should engage in because they're going to lead to happiness, because they're going to lead away from suffering and pain. And so, again, if we take that in a kind of a really broad sense, dhammas, be it generosity, be it precepts, not harming, hurting, ahimsa, so non-violence, and so on and so forth, being a good ethical person, having a good ethical lifestyle, these are also all dhammas. That can be our second sense. Dhammas as like wholesome or good practices that we should undertake. And then we've got kind of this third category as well. For example, like mindfulness of dhammas as like the 4 noble truths, which are then going to be these realizations, these understandings of how the world really works. So be it the 4 noble truths, be it even, say, dependent origination, understanding that all phenomena exist dependent upon other phenomena. And when those causes and conditions change, then the results themselves are going to change. And so everything is just this kind of ongoing flowing process of causally conditioned phenomena. And of course, another implication of that, of course, is that nothing has eternal existence, nothing exists in and of itself, equals there is no unchanging, permanent soul or self-entity. Okay, so we've kind of got these different levels and layers of this idea of dhamma, but they are connected by, so we've got the phenomena that make up the world. By examining and understanding those, that's our practice. That's dhammas as practice, is to understand dhammas as phenomena, and that is going to in turn lead to understanding dharma or dhammas as truth or reality, shall we say. Okay, now that's some pretty heavy stuff. That's some pretty heavy stuff at this point. So I'm just going to pause for a second here. Just looking at the time. The time's 9:29, so we've still got a bit of time to do a little bit more discussion. But if you've got some questions at this point, please fire out the questions. While you think of those, I'm just going to go back to the text. So, what I've just said, we've got a lot of categories. We've got the 5 aggregates, we've got the 6 bases, we've got the 7 Bodhi factors, we've got the 5 noble truths. Whew, a lot of stuff. We're not going to be able to cover all of these in a minute in a 20-minute meditation session. So what I would like to do is just go back and talk about the 5 aggregates. Let's just talk about this first basic and really important category, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. so that in a minute when we do our sitting session, we can use the 5 aggregates as our point of observation, our contemplation of dharmas, meaning our contemplation of these 5 aggregates. Okay, so just if you've got any questions at this point up to what I've just been saying, please throw them out. Okay, in the meantime, I just see we've got a couple more comments coming through. One from Eric there. Good morning from the Philippines. Good to see you again. Glad you are joining us again. Comment from Tim here. Not bad, actually. Of course, I'm Madhyamaka. Yeah, now I'm going to have to... I'm not saying I will do a course on Madhyamaka, but... Okay, we're going to talk about this later. End of today's class. We're going to talk for a little bit, and I want your feedback on what we're going to do for the next course. We'll talk about that later. And then I see we've got Jay Lee there. Good morning. Good morning as well. Welcome. Nice to see you. Okay. Now, no one's fired out any questions, so I'm going to go back to the text, okay? Back to the text. Back to the text. I hope this kind of my attempted balance between reading the text and doing the practice is kind of working out for you. Okay. 5 hindrances. Maybe you should do this. Okay, we've already kind of covered this, right? So when we're doing our mindfulness practice, really important to be aware. Do we have desire? Do we have aversion? We've already covered this like in the last week or two. If we do, important to note it. When you see it, note it. Desire, that's a desirous thought. Or that's a thought of aversion or hatred. Right? It's a thought of craving. There are other hindrances as well. Sloth and torpor. In simpler terms, dull, sleepy mind. It's that. I'm gonna cut back so you can see me. You know, how do you know that you got doubt, sloth, and torpor? It's, you know, when you see meditators and they're like this, and their head is nodding forward and they're kind of like falling off, and maybe a bit of drool coming out the mouth. I know it's a bit graphic, but that sloth and torpor, that like dull, and your mind's all foggy and hazy. Okay, if you've got it, note it. Sloth and torpor, sloth and torpor. Dullness, sleepiness, it's present in my mind. Another important one, restlessness and remorse. It's the mind that it's really like scattered, can't calm down at all. So note that like desirous and can't calm down are not the same thing. Now it's not just restlessness, it's restlessness and remorse. So this in particular, if we've done something that's a bit of an unskillful or unwholesome action, and then we're kind of like worried about it, like I just, you know, I don't know, like you really lose it at someone, and like, you know, lose your temper and whatever, and then you kind of like afterwards you're like, that person's gonna like hate me, and like that is also part of it as well. This remorse from doing an unskillful action. And last of all, doubt. In particular, this is not just doubt in general. I think the biggest one here is when we have doubt as to the practice. You're like, I'm doing mindfulness meditation, but I am not sure that this is going to help me at all. Okay, now, it's not like science. It kind of is like science. I'll get to that in a second. In science, when we're dealing with purely external things, you know, you can say, look, I can doubt gravity, but if I drop something, I can witness it for myself, right? Because in that case, the doubt's this internal phenomena, and gravity's, I'm dealing with this outside phenomenon. I'm going to drop a brick and see if it falls to the ground. But when it comes to meditation, because we're dealing with the mind, then the mind and all the phenomena that are going on in the mind are the things in our experiment. So doubt isn't just this thing that's unrelated to our experiment. If we have doubt, then it's actively interfering with what we're trying to work with. So whereas a lot of people say, you know, oh, in science you can be skeptical and it won't change the outcome. I'm going to say that won't work for a scientific approach to our own mind, because our own mind includes the doubt itself, right? And that doubt will be an obstacle. So if you've got that issue, we need to develop a bit of faith, and we can So I think the simplest way is just simply go through and look at the accounts of people that have done these meditation practices and see how it's worked for them, and that, it'll make you think, yeah, these do work. Okay, like I said though, I was going to focus on the 5 aggregates. So what are these 5 aggregates? Okay, again, a meditator abides contemplating dhammas as dhammas in terms of the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. And how does a meditator abide contemplating dhammas as dhammas in terms of the 5 aggregates? Here, a meditator understands such is material form, such its origin, such its disappearance. Okay, so material form is the physical body. Now, in a sense, we've kind of already covered this in the first ground of mindfulness, which is mindfulness of the body, right? So, you're aware this is the physical body. And we can also expand that out, such as this is the origin. So, where does the physical body come from? Now, I think with some of that, is this the Buddhist profound insight? Well, if you really start thinking about this, there's far more profound than we might first give it credit for. And even this contemplation that the body is composed of food. And everyone's like, well, duh. This is one of the very oldest Buddhist meditations and contemplations. And it may sound like something very simple, but there's a huge amount of wisdom. You are what you eat. It's an easy comment to make, but it's true. It's true. The way that this body is made and the things that we put into it, of course there's an important relationship. And that relationship, again, is like this classic example of dependent origination. So this is a really important contemplation. Those of you that might have some experience, say, in the Chinese Buddhist traditions, if you've done like a classic dining hall, monastic dining hall experience, you might have heard of the 5 contemplations. So the dining hall is called the Hall of 5 Contemplations. So the first one is 积功多少良比来处. So contemplate or, calculate the amount of work that has gone into preparing the food and consider the sources of the food. There's a lot of, it's quite profound. Think about, like, today I had cornbread with avocado and a cup of coffee for my breakfast. Okay, so where'd the avocado come from? And I can kind of trace it back and think of this whole chain of dependent origination, the seed and the farmers, and even the seed, and how many generations have they been cultivating the seed and developing it, and then the farmers who farmed it and packaged it, picked it, packaged it, probably, I don't know if I think these are from Taiwan, then they've transported it here through their shop, and then I've bought it, right? There's a huge process, and all this is being then affected, and it's going in, and literally the physical matter that makes up that food is now, due to my digestive process, is becoming part of my physical body. Something which you look at a piece of food, look at avocado, and they're like, am I an avocado? No, I'm not an avocado. An avocado is an avocado, and I am me. Well, if you've been eating that avocado, literally atoms from that and being broken down, like the proteins, for example, and fats, are being now reconstructed into my body and becoming part of me. Such is material form, such is its origin, such is its disappearance. These cells that make up my body die, and they are in many ways expunged from my body, be it excrement, be it, when you shower and you like scrub your body and that layer of dead skin cells is coming off, at first, like, skin cells, you touch my skin, a stranger comes along, starts patting your arm, like, oh, you creep, you're touching me. But then we get to a point where we just scrub it off in the shower and wash it down the drain, and we're happy to see it go because it's like disgusting and dirty. It's kind of bizarre. Things that I don't think of as me become part of me, my body, and then after a certain time they are no longer part of my body, and we reject, like, it's just this like flux of change. And that's just talking about kind of this day-to-day process. You really want to get into this, so the physical body, for example, from birth, conception, how does this happen? Now, you know how it happens, right? So cells from our mother and from our father, how they've come together, the DNA patterns that come from those and from our parents and go back. In the last couple of years, my dad's been getting into family trees. He's got this account at like Ancestry online and shared it with me. I go in and it's not through my surname's Osborne, so the paternal side goes back many generations. Can trace that back a few generations, but there's another part that comes through. Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, can trace it back to the 15th century or something. And it's all these threads that have come together that have partly made up who I am in terms of my kind of genetic component. Let alone the processes, from conception through gestation of a fetus and then birth. These are the processes that constitute this physical body, and then that's going to continue on in the future as I get older. Ultimately, this body's going to die, and probably cremate me, sprinkle me in a garden somewhere. I'm going to be fertilizer for the plants, or bury me. I'm going to be food for the worms. And then these are going to this physical matter is just going to reappear in some other way, shape, or form. That can be a very profound meditation on this body which we so cling to. So all these atoms, right? So many kilos of these atoms. I mean, a lot of that's just water anyway, and it's not even our own kind of DNA, right? Get rid of that, left with them. A little bit left. For the short period in this configuration, we cling to it so much as our own bodies. But before that, it was something other than me. It was something other, not me, and we didn't care about it. And then after it dies, as I've mentioned, during the mindfulness of the body and the contemplation of a dead body, we not only don't cling to the body when it's dead, we might even have this powerful aversion towards it. What's that about? I mean, seriously, what's that about? That's such a change, and reflecting on the body in that way can generate a lot of wisdom. That's just the body. Okay. We can do something similar for the feelings, right? And we've kind of already done this, right? You kind of see a bit of duplication, right? So like this contemplation of the material form, the physical body, is pretty much the same as the first ground of mindfulness. And contemplate the second one, contemplations of feelings, their origins, where do feelings come from when our senses have contact with different objects, and then we have these feelings based on it, and they don't just come about from the senses in terms of like my eye sees this thing and I have a pleasant feeling. There's also a lot of past conditioning in that, because that can also help to explain why I can see this thing and see it as pleasant, and somebody else can see that thing and see it as unpleasant, for example. Conditioned. And so where does that conditioning come from? That also ties us back to a lot of other past experiences. And we also know, thanks to people like Pavlov, that it's possible to condition ourselves to respond to different objects and different sensory experiences in different ways. We can condition ourselves to see things in a pleasant experience, and condition ourselves to see things in an unpleasant experience. And I think a lot of people's, why are some people so happy? We can do this and do that, and everything seems good and happy to them. A lot of that's their own conditioning. They have, through the course of probably not just this lifetime when they're younger, but maybe even past lifetimes, when they've had past contact with similar types of objects, it's been in a situation whereby they have been happy and joyous, and so we tie them together. Other people often, lots of things cause them fear and pain, and that in turn is probably when they've experienced those things in the past, you have painful experiences. That's just pretty simple stuff, right? Conditioning. Because we can see, by contemplating this way and seeing and having this understanding that it is conditioning, it's got a very important lesson in there. It's possible to recondition and also to decondition. A lot of kind of more good, sort of like feel-good philosophies, which I'm not saying are not valuable. I shouldn't use feel-good philosophies. It sounds a bit kind of deprecating. But there are a lot of sort of practices that are, or some forms of meditation, or, you know, maybe something like neuro-linguistic programming, I think is the term, where we are trying to recondition ourselves into a kind of a more positive and healthy way. I think that's still very valuable. Here, though, what we're trying to do isn't so much that. We're not trying to recondition ourselves to just be happy all the time, or think, you know, build up a positive sense of self-esteem. But it's to really decondition ourselves, which is what's needed for liberation. But having said that, I still think for a lot of cases, it's important to go from a negative conditioning to kind of more positive, healthy conditioning, and then from that go to a state of deconditioning. Perceptions, right? So again, when we have these different thoughts about things, and they can be from just basic things like, you know, this is a microphone, this is a computer mouse, this is a webcam, to more complicated concepts like, you know, mouse, computer, microphone, webcam. Okay, this is a live streaming setup. Okay, slightly more complex, abstracted, and also, you know, the whole range of different concepts and ideas that we have about things. So again, we can reflect on these in terms of, first of all, identifying them for what they are. There's a thought, there's a concept, right? There's a perception about something. There's an idea about something. The origin, what's the origin of that? And the key thing there is to realize that by saying something has an origin, it means it's conditioned. It did not exist, and now it does exist due to conditions. Therefore, it is also impermanent and not something to be clung to. Formations. So this is the fourth aggregate. Sometimes I like to just translate this as emotions. Sometimes there are formations or volitions, emotions. So even like desire and aversion. So before we were talking about, like, you know, sensory experience, a pleasant experience, that's the pleasure is the aggregate of feeling or sensation. But then we might respond to that with desire. That desire is in the fourth aggregate, this one here, formations or volitions or emotions. Again, if we have that emotion coming up in ourselves, identify that. That's an emotion, right? I'm experiencing desire. I'm experiencing frustration. I'm experiencing jealousy. I'm experiencing generosity. I'm experiencing compassion. When we've got that, see it not for what it is, and again, see its origin. See that this is conditioned, that there are various things that have occurred in the distant and near past that have brought this about, and it's going to change, and then it's also going to cease as well. Therefore, it is impermanent. It's ultimately dissatisfactory. It is not self. And last of all, contemplating consciousness. So just this bare ability to see. Right now I'm seeing. Am I aware that what I'm doing now is just seeing? I'm hearing. It's just hearing, right? Smelling, tasting, touching. All these things. They are what they are. They have causes and conditions to bring them about. They change, and then they also cease, or they stop, and of course some other phenomena then occurs immediately after it. So by reflecting then on all of these, right, here we go. If we look up here on the top, oh, now you might not be able to see this. Don't know if you can see it. Maybe it's blocked out by the little video camera box that I've put a picture of myself. I'm sorry. Okay. The meditator abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a meditator abides, contemplating dharmas as dharmas in terms of the five aggregates. So just most important thing, the basic thing when we're doing it is when the physical body, so physical body is physical body, right? That's it. Sensations are sensations. Perceptions are perceptions. Emotions are emotions. Cognitive states are cognitive states. See them, we know them for what they are, and we do not cling to them. We also don't push them away, right? You just be aware of them, see them for what they are, let them change, pass on, something else is then going to occur to you. So this is kind of what's often referred to as bare mindfulness or bare awareness. And it's a remarkably powerful practice. Okay, so just kind of a little bit more detail there about the 5 aggregates. Let me pop out back to the other screen there. Okay, I see we've got a couple of comments here. Comments 15 minutes ago. I'm sorry, because when I'm looking at the when I'm looking at like the text, then I can't see the Facebook page to see your comments. So my apologies, but now I can go back. We've got a couple of comments here. First comment is, "Hi Professor, good morning. Good morning to you too. In practicing mindfulness, how do I deal when repressed emotions and thoughts come up?" Well, I think we've just kind of covered that a little bit more. So a repressed emotion, so an emotion comes up, okay? You identify it as an emotion. Okay, so maybe it's this sense of, I don't know, maybe anger about something. Okay, when it comes up, anger. You see, this is anger. Anger has arisen. Okay, maybe it's sticking around for a while longer. Okay, anger, it's still there. It might change, right? It's getting a little bit different. Okay, there might be some feeling associated with the anger. You might feel like, oh, I feel tightness in my chest. Okay, tightness in my chest. Yep, tightness. Oh, it's moving a bit. It's coming. Tightness is now in my throat, for example. Just see it for what it is, okay? So you deal with it. I guess that's how we deal with it. We're not going to try to like, oh no, as anger. Don't go on to the like, anger's a bad thing, therefore I need to get rid of it. Okay. Right? The best way to get rid of it, first just see it for what it is. Take it very clearly, identify it, see it. Now it's going to change, it's going to move. There might be other phenomena associated with it. So one example would be, some emotions also have associated like physical sensations and physical parts of the body. See those. Just try to be really objective and just look at them for what they are. Okay, that's the basic approach by these mindfulness practices. Okay, we've got another question here. Q. Is the concept of the 5 aggregates based on some early Indian belief during the Buddha's time? Without wanting to go on a long kind of Indian history of ideas, I'd say the short answer is this. The fact that it's 5 and the term 5 aggregates, so skanda, okay, the Brahmins also had a sense of skanda. Skanda is a heap or a bundle. It's a bundle of firewood. And so a classic practice would be to sit with 5 fires. So the Brahmins believe fire was purifying. And the fire is purifying, it causes pain. And by that pain, that tapas, you burn away bad karma. And you burn away these past sins. And so you have one fire in front of you, one to the right, one to the left, one fire behind you, and you do it in the middle of the day. And so the hot midday Indian summer sun is your 5th fire. And so each of these, I guess except for the sun, has a bundle of wood, and the bundle of wood is called a skanda. You have 5 skandas, and they burn away your sins, so to speak. So I think the Buddha then just uses the idea of 5 bundles. You've got 5 bundles of stuff, but these are not fires. These are just our bodies. We can break it up into 5 basic categories of things. Okay, so it was kind of, he was kind of then just using kind of like, the Brahmins have the system of 5 bundles of wood. Well, we ourselves are made up of 5 bundles of stuff. Now, remember, the 5 aggregate system isn't the only system, and the Buddha often used other systems. Another really simple example is like the 6 elements. So earth, water, fire, and air, space, and consciousness. And so basically, we can break down everything into these 6 categories. This gives, earth, water, fire, and air are all physical. And then space and consciousness, so all the mental one becomes just one. So this gives more emphasis then on the physical world, using the system of the 6 bases. So we've got these 6 senses and 6 objects, so 12 in total, using the 18 dhatu, so the 18 elements. 6 senses, 6 sense objects, and 6 forms of consciousness. It's another system. So the number 5 isn't that critical. You can just basically say, look, you've got all the stuff, all the phenomena that make up the world, and you can break it down into different categories. Some systems might be more detail in this area, some systems might be more detail in that area. That's not the critical thing, really. So there's kind of 5 bunches of stuff. The Buddha just kind of borrowed it, but of course the Buddha's content is totally different. You can't say that the actual 5 aggregates themselves, right? Physical form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness are borrowed from another tradition. No, but it was just kind of like, similar number. And so due to his own experiential observation, yeah, very much so. Any of these systems, the Buddha is constantly saying, look, this became kind of a later definition of what a dharma is. So dharma as a phenomena was anything that can be an object of our cognitive mind, the physical world, smells, colors, flavors, tastes. Also internal things, emotions, we can perceive and know all of these things. However, and there's a critical thing, the so-called soul, or as defined by some schools, so this idea, or even like God, so we have this idea in many traditions that like, you'll hear this, so, oh, God created the world, God is unknowable. I think to the Buddha, also to myself, not saying that I'm a Buddha, but would be like, look, if God is unknowable, how can you say that God exists? I mean, you're contradicting yourself, right? To say that like he's unknowable, but we know all these things. He's unknowable, but he's omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent. But you said he was unknowable, so how do you know that? Or this idea that the soul, again, or God, is somehow beyond the senses. Well, how do you know it exists? And so the Buddha was quite reluctant to talk about things that are outside of our experience. And so in this way, we see kind of, when we're talking about this idea of non-self or non-soul, it's not so much that the Buddha said, oh, there is no soul. But the Buddha said, you can't perceive a thing that matches this description of a soul. You can't find one. A soul is unfindable. Now, some people might sort of say, oh, well, it's unfindable, but it still exists. But to the Buddha, it's sort of like, if it's unfindable to make that statement, it still exists, is, in Chan Buddhist term, it's what's Chinese, it's painting, it's unnecessary. It's like horns on a rabbit. Okay, got another comment here from Eleanor. Okay, this is kind of a continuation of one of the earlier questions. In cases where there's some kind of emotional distraction during meditation that's tied to a person's ethical conduct, is noticing the feeling of it enough to deal with it, or is the time to address it within the Buddhist ethical structure, or put it aside until you're done meditating, being mindful? Yeah, this is a really important question. I think the way often these teachings are given, particularly in contemporary Western and often non-religious, non-Buddhist mindfulness, is they'll sort of say, it's enough. You just need to know it, and that's kind of always enough. But I think we've got to remember, and as I've said many times, look at the text we're reading. It says bhikkhus. That's talking to monks and nuns. And most of these kinds of teachings were to people that already had this foundation. So kind of the assumption in the text is you've already got a basic establishment of Buddhist ethics, and that's also something that you're constantly trying to improve and develop. And if you've got that well under control, then hopefully you shouldn't have too many issues that are tied to ethical conduct. Right? I went out and robbed a bank today, and now I'm coming home, and I'm a bit stressed about robbing a bank. It's very hard work robbing a bank, so I'm going to meditate and feel better about myself and calm down. And you're like, oh my, you're afraid that like any sound, it's the police, they're surrounding the house. Yeah, not really conducive to meditation, huh? So that's one of the reasons why the ethical foundation is there. But at the same time, there might be a case whereby in our past we have done unethical things that might cause us some kind of remorse. But then again, in the Buddhist sense, the Buddha didn't encourage one to always be like worrying about it or feel guilty about it. Okay, we've done this negative action in the past. It's going to have some kind of result. But I will say that kind of result isn't fixed. If we have, we recognize it's an unethical act. We recognize, we're really trying to change our ways and change our behavior. And doing our best to kind of rectify that situation, then we're already going to make the bad result of that negative karma lessen. And then once we're doing that, there's no point in dwelling on it. There's no point in kind of like, oh, I was evil, I did all these bad things. Classic example, like the story of Angulimala. So he was a non-Buddhist religious practitioner who got caught up with a real bad guru, who basically said, you want to be liberated, you need it's like 99, you need to kill 99 people and collect their thumbs, I think. So he killed them and he chopped off their thumbs and he made a necklace of thumbs. He got up to the 99th person, he tried to kill the Buddha, and he ended up talking to the Buddha, and the Buddha converted him. The guy is a hardcore serial killer, 99 people. Somehow he managed to still attain liberation. I mean, he also had a lot of other good karma in the past as well. But the fact is, once he started with the Buddha, he changed his behavior. He had to recognize he's got some bad stuff coming to him for that. But for now, he's back on the right path. So what we need to do is we still need to make sure that ethical foundation is good and pretty strong, and then we can work on our meditation. If we've still got those, what I usually say is if we've still got, when we're meditating, these issues might come up, and there's always a juicy story, true. These issues might come up. Now, if we're able to if we've still got enough stability in a meditation to kind of have that mindful awareness of it, like, okay, recognize, okay, this image is coming up, or this experience, this feeling's coming up, be mindfully aware of it, and be able to deal with it in a mindful way. If we can do that, then that's what you can do with it. Though it is possible, and, I definitely, I've had students in meditation that they can't do it, that memory or that experience that's coming up is too much. Well, literally, they cannot sit there. They have to go and leave. Okay, if it's to that point, that's okay. Go and leave. You might have to work on other practices or do other things. And once those are done, then you can come back. So, a simple example might be something just like, you might otherwise be a generally fairly ethical person, and you do fairly regular meditation. You might have some issue with a family member, some long-term family issue unresolved, have this real blowout with a family member, and you come back to meditation and, you're feeling like, oh, I totally lost my stuff at that person, and I just feel really bad about it, like I was just totally out of line. Okay, then just stop your session and call them or message them or something and apologize. That's not going to just make it magically go away, but if you can't meditate because that's just the only thing in your head, then do it. And once you've done that, then come back and meditate. We talk about from ethics, meditation, and wisdom, right? Shila Samadhi Prajna Jie Ding Hui. It's not like you totally finish this and then you go on to this, and you totally finish this and go on to this. These are constantly related, dependently originated relationship. And so you build up a foundation here, you move on here. As you move on here, you recognize there's some things back here you still need to work on. That strengthens, and you develop a bit of wisdom and a bit of insight. And with that insight, you might recognize that there's things in your meditation you can improve, and things also in your ethics that you can improve. So it's this constant cycling around. They're all supporting each other. So in our practice, we also need to do this. We need to make sure we're working on all of them to some degree, because they will all support each other. It's a bit like a tripod, right? If one leg is weak, it's going to mean the others are, won't stand. There's another good metaphor I learned recently. There's a gardening metaphor. Well, it's used in gardening. Anyway, it's like a barrel, so like a barrel, big container, and it's got the wooden strips that go from the top to the bottom, and it's a bunch of strips. And so when you want to fill up the barrel, if all these strips are fine, but if one of the strips of wood in the barrel is broken, then the water can only go that high. It doesn't matter if all the other strips of your barrel are strong all the way up to the top, but one of those strips is only halfway up. The other strips being to the full height doesn't matter. It's only as good as the weakest element, right? So that's an important thing to kind of reflect on. What's my weakest point in my practice right now? Work on that. Identifying the problem area and working on the problem area. After a while, when you've strengthened that and rectified that, you'll find that then there's a different point that's the weak point. And then, okay, I've got to turn and move to that. And some people don't do that. I think sometimes some particular traditions, they'll emphasize this one practice. Now, it's good to have a single practice. It's like this thread that just goes through all the things that you're doing and holds your whole practice together. And just you're doing it every day, and it just builds up this real strong line. That's good too, but we've also got the flexibility to realize certain times, certain issues need to be dealt with. And if we don't have that flexibility to go and do that, then of course other things will suffer. Okay, talk from me. Blah blah blah. Okay. Looking at the time, we got to meditate. Okay, too much talking. Time for some meditation, people. Sixth class, I think you kind of know how to meditate by now in this basic structure. So let's just do a couple of minutes of some simple stretches. Then we're going to get our butts on our cushions and do some sitting. Okay, down with camera A. Grab your cushion. Take your spot. Okay, bare basic necessities of stretches. Your ankles, your hips, I don't know if you can hear the cracking of my bones on the through the microphone. Okay, stretching up and down, breathing out, stretching up, breathing in, and down, breathing out, up, breathing in, and down, breathing out. Okay, one more time, up, and relax. Okay, neck, side to side. Okay, back and forward. Talking about weakest point, same like when you're doing stretching, if you get all your pain in your knees, warm those up more. If you get all your pain in your ankles, do those more. Hit your weak point, strengthen it. Okay, time to take our seat, everyone. Oh, put this up. So for today, let's just be mindful, shall we? We are just going to continue with our breath, of course. That's our kind of thing that just keeps that base kind of calm and focus. And then as we're doing that, we'll do that for 5 minutes maybe, just the breath. And then we're going to move in and just be mindful. Whatever comes up, be they external sensory stimuli, be they internal feelings, sensations, perceptions, emotions, see them. Okay, be mindful of them. Recognize them for what they are. See how they have come into existence. See how they're going to change. See how they're going to pass out of existence and cease to be. Okay, all with a state of non-attachment. Okay, we're just going to see them. Just that's what they are. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay, you want to have your glasses off maybe? Okay, let's just start the session mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out, mindfully breathing in short, mindfully breathing out short, mindfully breathing in long, mindfully breathing out long, mindfully breathing in, experiencing and relaxing the whole body. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Just adjust your posture if you need to, make sure you're relaxed, but with the good posture aids in our clear awareness. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. just continue with the breath. Mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. And as we are continuing with the breath, and there are other phenomena that occur, just going to be aware of that. For example, might be aware of a sensation in the knee. We might hear a sound. We might have a memory or some thought occur. Might have some emotion come up. And we're just going to be aware of that. Just going to think, okay, it's a painful sensation in the knee. Might say, oh, that's hearing a sound. Or we might think, okay, mindful of sense of sadness. Or maybe mindful of a sense of excitement. Maybe something exciting you've got planned for tomorrow or something like that. Just be mindfully aware of what they are. Return to the breath. The key thing is we're just going to be aware of things as they are. We don't have to judge them. Don't have to think, oh, I've got a sore knee, I'm a bad meditator. Or think, I've got a sense of excitement, oh, I'm not very good at this, or naughty me. And even if you have that thought of judgment, just be mindful, oh, that's a thought of judgment. We're going to see that these phenomena come into existence. They might stick around for a little while, maybe just even a second, and then they cease to be. Meantime, mindfully breathing in, mindfully breathing out. Nice deep full breath in. Slowly exhale all the way out. Gently rock from side to side. Bring our mindfulness back to the body and movement. Okay, we're still mindful. Stretching forward. Left leg. Your right leg. In the center. Back up. Roll the shoulders. Stretch the neck. Warm up the palms of our hands. Cover our eyes. Massage around the eyes. Be mindful of the contact, feelings, sensations. The ears, particularly the earlobes. Back of the head and neck. Chest, stomach, and lower back. Okay, and you can unfold your legs and stretch out your legs, give them a rub down if you need to. Okay, I'm just going to move forward and change cameras, and then we've got a few minutes. We can talk about the end of the text and of course our usual Q&A time. Okay, camera change back here. Okay. How are you all feeling? Hope you're feeling nice and clear and aware. I'm sorry, today, meditation session was a little bit shorter than usual. This end part of the text with mindfulness of dharmas is a little longer. There's a lot of stuff in there. But you know, a text like this and meditation in general, we could have an hour and a half a day for a month and we'd still have lots of material to look at, and still not, exhaust all the content. And so, time is limited. There's always a very good Buddhist lesson in there, right? Time is limited. Work hard, make the most of what we can with the time and the opportunities we have available, and move on. So just at the end of the session there, time is already up according to this, but we've still got a few minutes. I would just like to mention a bit at the end of the text, if I can skip back over to the end of the text. Here, Bhikkhu Bodhi calls it a conclusion. So he says, meditators, if anyone should develop these four foundations of mindfulness in such a way, so meaning in the way in which the text describes, for 7 years, one of two fruits, or two results, should be expected for them. Either final knowledge, so it means liberation, here and now, or if there's a trace of clinging left, non-return. So it's not liberation, but it means it's very, very close to it. It means that, in Buddhist technical terms, after one finishes this life as a human, one is born in a heavenly realm, and in that heavenly world attains liberation there. So high result, 7 years of practice. But then it says, let alone 7 years, 6 years, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 year. And then if we continue here, this paragraph here. Let alone 1 year, let alone years, 7 months, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 month, even let alone for half a month. If anyone should develop these 4 foundations of mindfulness in such a way for 7 days, one can lead to this result. Now, that's a very big claim. I'm not going to claim it here. There are some traditions, particularly in Burma, maybe Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, where they do 7-day retreats. For example, the Goenka tradition, they do typically 10-day retreats, I believe. Now, again, I'm not going to say that one will definitely attain liberation, but let's just, okay, we've got our ultimate goals of Buddhism. It might be liberation. We might be on the Bodhisattva path and seeking not just our own liberation, but also to benefit others as well. But I will say one thing. If you practice, even if you practice for 20 minutes, even if you tune in for a 1.5 hour class, live streamed on Facebook, you will get something out of it, right? And I like to think of this as an important kind of way of thinking about practice. There's a really interesting story about the famous Tibetan yogi Milarepa. So, I don't know if you've heard of Milarepa or heard of his story. So, one of the stories goes at one point he wanted to engage in these practices, and somebody was like promoting this particular practice. They said, like, it's so amazing, you will attain Buddhahood, and they said something like, if you practice it in the morning, you will attain Buddhahood by the evening, like same day. And it sounds pretty amazing, huh? All your money back. And Milarepa thought, well, if it's so good, I'm in no rush. I don't have to practice it now because I can practice it later because it doesn't really take any time. And so when we hear of practices that are like touted as being super good, in some ways it can make us a bit lazy. Some ways, and for some people. And so it's kind of a bit of a trick. Like, what's the psychology here in promoting these teachings? But I say one thing: any practice. So never mind like how long until I get awakened. I actually had when I was at Buddhist college, I remember this student came in from Israel, and he was kind of like that, like, how many days or months until I get liberated? And the teachers were like, okay. There's another good story of this practitioner is practicing with a Zen teacher, and said, if I practice really hard, how long until I'm awakened? I said 10 years. He says, what if I practice twice as hard? And the teacher said 20 years. So, what? Like, he said 10 years, and I said practice harder 20 years. You're too worked up about it. If you're so like, oh, I'm gonna attain liberation, it might help, it might not. It might just give us another form of attachment. So slow and steady does it. And that's what I'm going to say. Any practice we do, even a short session, it's one step. And that's the critical thing. There's only one person that will never attain liberation, and that's a person who never practices at all. I think that's a quote from, I think it's Ajahn Chah, maybe one of his teachers, Ajahn Mun or Ajahn Bodhisattva or something like that. The only person who's never going to attain liberation is the person who never practices. Meaning anything we can do is better than nothing. And that's a good way of looking at our own practice and also other people. It stops us being hypercritical of ourselves, hypercritical of other people. And, when we do a practice, rejoice in it. And I rejoice in your practice. I rejoice in my own practice. I rejoice in anyone's practice. Anyone who's trying to do something good in this world. Anyone who's trying to make themselves a better person, trying to help other people. Let's be grateful for that and rejoice in it. Even if it's a tiny amount. Never look down on that. So, thanks everyone for joining us. Okay, I see Hanuman is awoke. You are awakened. Terry, you're welcome. Now, this is the last class for this mindfulness meditation. I'll probably take maybe 2 weeks off again and come back with another course. What's that course going to be? Maybe after this, I'll put up a new post and just ask for your ideas. The Facebook, like the poll, like Facebook used to this poll thing, you put different options. They don't. It's like now it's only polls like yes or no. I mean, come on, Facebook, get it together. So somehow, I think I'll do it like last time. I'll give you like a range of different things, though, because the one before was, the Tiantai kind of style calm and insight meditation. This has been more kind of early Buddhism style mindfulness meditation. Maybe do something a bit more different. Maybe we can focus on a different idea. Maybe loving kindness or bodhicitta. Maybe we can be a bit more philosophical. Let's see. I haven't decided yet. So we can talk about that in the next couple of weeks. So remember to tune in if you see me posting here and asking some feedback. Though, of course, I can't guarantee that if you say you want such and such, I can definitely do it, because other people have different things that they want as well. In the meantime, remember, other videos are still up here. I'm now taking the videos after class because I got the streaming, this streaming interface. When I hit stream, it also records, and so then I'm uploading those to the YouTube channel. And then I was putting them on my own personal YouTube channel, but I'm actually totally forgetting that I've got a YouTube channel I've got a Bodhi Tree Buddhism Gmail account, and so that's got its own Gmail associated YouTube channel. So I'm actually going to start putting them there, but I'm going to use that in future. But then I've got the playlists from the old videos, so the old ones aren't lost. Don't worry about that. So if you want to subscribe to those, and you've got those there all on YouTube as well, feel free to share or recommend to other people as well. And we'll be back for another course. Probably do another 6 weeks on some topics to be decided. In the meantime, take care. Look after yourselves, your own bodies, minds, hearts. Look after each other, and be good. And may the three jewels guide and protect you. Okay, everyone. Take care. I'll see you all soon.